Good evening. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I'm sure it has been a happy one for you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So this evening, we're looking at the Samagama Sutta, Discourse. And this is concerning the Jains again. So this is what happened according to the Buddhist propaganda, you might say. I don't know whether this happened or not, but definitely something happened when the Nigantha, the leader of the Jains, died. And this is what is said. On his death, the Niganthas divided, split into two, and they had taken to quarreling and brawling and were deep in disputes, stabbing each other with verbal daggers. You do not understand this Dharma and discipline. I understand this Dharma and discipline. How could you understand this Dharma and discipline? Your way is wrong, my way is right. I am consistent, you are inconsistent. What should have been said first, you said last. What should have been said last, you said first. What you had so carefully thought up has been turned inside out. Your assertion has been shown up, You are refuted. Go and learn better, or disentangle yourself if you can. Daggers, definitely. So it seems there was nothing but slaughter amongst the Nigantha's pupils. I think that's a bit of an overstatement. I don't think you mean it physically. And the white-clothed lay disciples were disgusted, dismayed, and disappointed with the Nigantha's pupils, as they were with so badly proclaimed and badly expounded Dharma and discipline, which was unemancipating, unconducive to peace, expounded by one not fully enlightened, and was now with its shrine broken, left without a refuge. So that's a bit of Buddhist propaganda, I think. Anyway, the novice Chunda, who was seemingly a younger brother of Sariputta, was spending the rains where the Nigantha supposedly died in Pava. And he met Ananda, and he told Ananda about all these goings on. And Ananda said, well, we better go and have a chat with the Buddha, with the Blessed One. So they tell the Blessed One, the Buddha, everything that's been happening. And the Buddha replies, what do you think, Ananda? These things that I have taught you directly, in other words, my teachings, that is, and these are the 37 factors that lead to liberation, the Bodhipakkhiya Dhamma, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right kinds of striving, the 4 bases of spiritual power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 facts of enlightenment, the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm sure you understand all those. Do you see even 2 bhikkhus who make differing assertion about these things? Do you see any disputes arising? No, Venerable Sir, I do not even see 2 monks or monastics differing about this. But Venerable Sir, there are people who live deferential towards the Blessed One, who might, when he's gone, create a dispute in the Sangha about livelihood and about patimokkha, the rule. Now, such a dispute would be for the harm and unhappiness of many, for the loss, harm, and suffering of gods and humans. The Buddha replies, a dispute about livelihood or about patimokkha, the word livelihood, how they live. Remember, the bhikkhus stands for all, for the 4 assemblies, monks, nuns, lay women, lay men. So dispute about livelihood or about the patimokkha. So the patimokkha here is, of course, the specific rules, the institutional rules that govern the order. But as lay people, you can take it as the moral law. Said a dispute about that would be trifling. But should you dispute arising the Sangha about the path and the way, such a dispute would be for the harm and unhappiness of many. for the loss, harm, and suffering of gods and men. So he was much more concerned about the Dharma. Now he says there are 6 roots to disputes, and I think most of these we will recognize. And you can bring this into your daily life where you've seen it in the place of work, amongst your friends, and so on. And of course in politics. So someone is angry and revengeful, and dwells disrespectful and undifferential towards the teacher, towards the Dharma, towards the Sangha, does not fulfill the training. Now, if we see any such root of dispute, either in ourselves or externally, you should strive to abandon the same evil root of dispute and make sure that it does not arise in the future. So that's the great effort. That's one of the great efforts, isn't it? To let go of what was of something that's unwholesome, and to stop the unwholesomeness arising. So the first one is this business of anger and revenge. Then there's contemptuous. So that anger and revenge could be, for instance, of an employee towards the employer. Contemptuous and domineering could be the employer towards the employee. Then, of course, there's always envy and avarice, wanting somebody else, what other people have. There's deceit and fraud, fiddling. There's evil wishes and wrong view. So that's basically, wishing somebody, that they drop dead or something. And there are those who adhere to their own views tenaciously and relinquishes them with difficulty, even when they're wrong. They won't negotiate, they won't compromise. So there's your 6 things that create the roots of dispute: anger and vengefulness, contemptuous and domineering, envious and avaricious, deceitful and fraudulent, evil wishes with wrong view, and unable to negotiate, to come to a compromise or at all. Like, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. Reminds you of the Brexit negotiations. So those are your 6 roots of dispute. Then he says there are 4 kinds of litigation. So this is where things have to be sorted out. Litigation because of dispute, litigation because of accusation, because of an offence, and concerning proceedings. So there are 4 reasons why you take things to court in the order anyway. The first one is to try and work out the dispute, the disagreement. The second one is to sort out an accusation that's been made against somebody. Then there's one concerning a specific offence, and there's one about proceedings. And in order to sort this out, there are 7 kinds of settlements. Okay, so then it becomes clear what these 4 things are. So again, this has a direct connection with ordinary daily life. The removal by confrontation. Okay, so there's a dispute. Much like the Jains, it is the Dharma, it is not the Dharma, this is the discipline, this is not the discipline, etc., etc. Now, what the Buddha says is that everybody should meet in concord. In other words, to come with a heart of goodwill. And having met together, the guideline of the Dharma should be drawn out. In other words, they should actually discuss the way the teaching. So he's preparing the order for when he's not there, remember. And once the guideline has been drawn out, the litigation should be settled in a way which accords with it. Okay? Now, supposing that doesn't work, there is the opinion of the majority. If those bhikkhus cannot settle that litigation in that dwelling place, they should go to a dwelling place where there's a greater number of bhikkhus, where there's a greater number. So in other words, you go to a different court, a higher court, for some guidance and for the decision. Okay? So the opinion of the majority settles the dispute. So there's two ways, right? The dispute has arisen between two groups of people. They try to settle it by coming together and looking at what the Dharma says, looking, in ordinary daily life, looking at what the law says. And then when that doesn't work, you have to go to a bigger group or a higher court. Now, the next three are to do with individual offences. So this is more like people who commit crimes. So the first one is a litigation on account of memory. So here, a monk reproves another monk. So this is more to do with monks, but as I say, you can easily transfer it into ordinary daily life. So somebody reproves somebody else of such a grave offence. In this case, it's one involving defeat or bordering on defeat. So remember, the rules of defeat are killing, stealing, any sexual intercourse, and creating a split in the Dharma, in the Sangha, in the order of monks. So it would be creating, hate speech in society, things like that. So now the question is, does the Venerable One remember having committed such a grave offence, one involving defeat? I do not, friends. I do not remember having committed such and such a grave offence. In this case, the removal of litigation on account of memory should be pronounced. So in other words, this looks as though the witnesses, or there were no witnesses, it may be just have been hearsay, and we have to give the benefit of the doubt to the bhikkhu here, who says that he doesn't remember that at all, that somebody's defaming him. Now the next one is about litigation on account of past insanity. So here a bhikkhu reproves another bhikkhu of such a grave offence involving this defeat. Does the Venerable One remember having committed such a grave offence involving defeat? I do not remember having done so. Despite the denial, the former presses the latter further. Surely the Venerable One must know quite well if he remembers having committed such and such an offence. I had been out of, and he says, I'd gone mad, friend. I was out of my mind. And when I was mad, I said and did many things improper for a recluse, but I do not remember. I was mad when I did it. So in this case, because he's mad, the litigation is removed. It's not taken any further. Now, he might, of course, be lying, but some of you might have read a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, which was quite a bestseller, I don't know, 80s or something. And it was written by a man called Oliver Sacks, who is a great psychiatrist, writer about mental diseases. And there was a case in there of a man who murdered and perhaps mutilated is far too strong a word, but really did a lot of damage to his daughter. And if I remember rightly, it was an adopted daughter. And he couldn't remember, and he was believed that he couldn't remember, and he was put into a mental home. And while he was in the mental home, the nurses and people around him became more and more confident about him, and they would allow him out on a bicycle ride. So one day, while he's riding a bicycle, he hits something and he bumps his head, and he remembers what he did. And according to Oliver Sacks, it took them 6 months to stop him from trying to commit suicide. So things can happen where you just basically forget. Anyway, that's called madness. And as we've seen, it probably is. Now, there's another one which says, here there is the affecting acknowledgement of an offence. So in this case, a monk has done something wrong. He accepts it and he goes and apologizes. He reveals it and he discloses it. He goes to a senior bhikkhu, and after arranging his robe, etc., paying homage at his feet, and then sitting to the side, palms together, saying, Venerable Sir, I've committed such and such an offence, and I confess it. And the response is, do you see what you've done? Says, yes, I do. Will you practice restraint in the future? I will practice restraint in the future. Now, this is only for the lesser rules. And every half moon, the monks get together to do this confession. And this is the actual dialogue, where you say you've committed so many offences. You don't have to actually name them, although in some orders you do. You actually, and the response is, do you see what you've done? You say, yeah, I have. I've seen what I've done. Say, will you restrain in the future? I will restrain. So every 2 weeks, as it were, the slate is wiped clean. But remember, this is only for the lesser offences. And then finally, no, that's not. It's not final. It's 7, isn't it? There's the pronouncement of bad character against someone. So here, somebody is reproved, a great offence, one involving defeat, etc. And again, he says, I do not remember having committed the grave offence, despite the denial of former presses. Again, he denies it. And again, despite the denial, the former presses again. And finally, he does actually, admit it. So this reminds you of sort of libel cases, really, where somebody's trying to defend themselves against libel, and eventually, of course, the libel wasn't libel at all, but it was true. And of course, he such a person, they have a pronouncement of bad character against someone. So if the order does that, I'm not exactly sure as to what that means, but probably. See, he says, I remember having committed such a grave offence, one involving defeat or bordering on defeat. I was hurried, I was confused. When I said that, I did not remember having committed such and such a grave offence, one involving such a thing. Such a pronouncement of bad character against someone. And so there comes a settlement on this. And I think once somebody's known as a bad character, he has to leave that monastery, probably. And once he's done that, he's got to find some other support from somewhere. And if the lay people begin to recognize that he's not behaving properly as a monastic, they can refuse to offer him food, etc. Eventually, he could be driven just to disrobe. Now, tomorrow we'll actually look at that type of dispute. But for the present time, we can leave that. Now, the final one, I think, is a lovely way to deal with something. It's called covering over with grass. It's not the same as sweeping under the carpet, right? Try to forget it. So here there's quarreling and brawling, deep disputes, that they may have said and done many improper things. And so they should all meet together and they try to come to some sort of agreement about things. But the disputes and the brawling are far too much. And for the good of these venerables, for their own, I shall confess. So there's an inability for them to come to some sort of an agreement. And so the thing is to put grass over it and let it simmer for a while. Let it just rest for a while. And when the heat's gone out of the argument, then it's possible to bring it back. So those are the 7 ways in which you can deal with disputes and with people who have not behaved well. And as I say, most of them, I think all of them actually, can be related to ordinary daily life and what happens in ordinary society. So this is the Buddha trying to prepare the ground for his passing. He was the Nigantha was an elder contemporary. I don't know quite how much older to the Buddha he was, but obviously this had now come up for really dealing with. And then he goes, finally, he says, these 6 memorable qualities that create love and respect and conduce to helpfulness, to non-dispute, to non-concord, and to unity. Now, this is repeated on another discourse that we'll be doing tomorrow, and we'll be looking at the actual dispute that arises, gives us some idea as to what monks can get up to. So I hope that at least it's been informative and has increased your confidence in the Buddha and his teachings, and that this will drive you on to liberate yourselves from all suffering sooner rather than later. So we can do a bit of practice.